Well, so we're continuing with our series on financial dream building. And you know what? Now it's starting to get even more interesting. And Glenn, our clients know that in order for them to achieve success in building their dreams, they have to be vigilant and know about how they're going to manage their money, right? And in our last session, we spoke about persons having their dream to buy their house. And, when we have a dream for something, like we're investing our time and our energy, and we actually see it as an investment. And the reality is our financial life, it can present a lot of challenges, especially now. And I believe it's really wise for us to educate ourselves about the 5 money mistakes, which we will be discussing. And I should really say the top 5 money mistakes, right? Because these are the top 5. And what we need to know that there are steps we can take to correct these, or better yet, I should say, proactively avoid any common financial errors that we may make. Because I'm sure that there are more errors that we can make financially, right? But we just want to cover the 5. And in this session, we want to cover 3 of those mistakes. We don't want to overwhelm you with all 5 mistakes in one session. So Glenn, I think it would be nice for us just not to give problems. As dream builders, we learn that we should think solutions, right? So how about us talking some solutions as we help our listeners with some really helpful practical tips that they can use? What do you think about that?
I love that idea.
Yeah. So, Glenn, as we're starting, any idea what I'm going to be talking about for my mistake number 1?
Well, I know the one that I would put as number 1, but let's just find out what you have planned. Go ahead.
All right. Well, since you insist, I will go first. So on the top of my list is having no financial plan for the future.
That in itself, I guess, is a plan, not a good one, but
and you notice I'm putting you on the spot. I'm pausing for you to comment, but that's okay. Just wanted to put you on the spot there. And if you're listening right now, I'd like you to just grab your pen and paper. We want to give you some really good tips from what we have learned. And it's going to be like an exercise for you. So over the next week or so, I'd like you to just go ahead and start working on solutions for this mistake number 1. So first, I'd like you to list your financial areas that you'd like to research. Just go ahead and just list all of that. And so that's one solution I'm giving you for mistake number 1. I know Glenn has more, so I'll let Glenn put in what else he have to add.
Okay. Well, you know what? It's a lot of people don't operate with a plan. We're like, okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to work and do what I have to do. And this would be nice. But we all kind of have, a date in mind. The most common date is that age 65. A lot of us think about retirement, right? And then if we're planning that, we're going to say, okay, how old am I now? How long do I have? What do I got to do to make sure that life is how I expect it to be, or at least the opportunity to do things the way I'd like to between now and then. So what do I need to do? Mm-hmm. Now, here's one of the things. Sometimes whatever numbers come up for what you want can be overwhelming, and that can be discouraging. But the point is to get started, knowing what you should have, and then getting started on a way to get there. As you're on the path, you will figure out ways to become better at it and more efficient, but you must figure out what you want and get started, because otherwise it's not going to happen. Think back 20 years. How fast did that go? Think of the next 20 years. How fast will that go if we're lucky enough to be here? So get something down, think of some goals, and let's get started toward it.
Yes. I think that's really fabulous. And also, what I think is important for them is to do is actually start putting aside for each goal and just be very specific, because we'll write things down, but sometimes we're not very specific and we wonder why we can't reach it. But I really love those suggestions, Glenn. Those are really good suggestions. And Also, I'd like to add, while you're taking notes, if you could just go ahead and just list 3 ways you can use to motivate yourself to take action toward your financial goals. Because a lot of us, when it comes to finances, we'd say, that's not my strong point. So my mom used to use a phrase when we were smaller. She used to say, encouragement strengthens labor. So I'm asking you, what encouragement will you give yourself just to strengthen the work that you have to do now? You have to give yourself something to motivate you, right? And while you're encouraging yourself, if you have debts, I would like you to just write on your notepad, right? What is your plan to get out of debt? Do you have a plan? So just list all your debts on that sheet and then just write your plan down. It may take some time, but you can go ahead and do that. And Glenn, I'm going to ask you, do you have anything else that you want to tell them?
Always have something. So here's one of the things, whatever that goal may be, if it's a shorter term goal, like saving up for a purchase, maybe it's going on a vacation, maybe eventually it's being able to buy that home or that vacation home or that car, whatever it is, get a picture of something like that and keep it where you can see it every day. That helps to refocus you and just keep it top of mind. Pictures are very, very powerful, right? So get a picture of, maybe it's that place you always wanted to go, or a place you want to retire, or a type of car you want. Get a picture, cut it out, put it right where you will see it every day. And just spend a few seconds at the very least, or a few minutes, just dreaming of when you're there. That will refocus the mind and you'll figure out ways to make that happen, right? Now, Janice touched on debt. One of the biggest things with debt, first of all, it happens to most of us. I'm going to put myself right there as well, right? I have had debt that a lot of you will never see, thankfully, and it can be crushing. But formulating a way to get out of it is huge. And then getting started. Notice everything goes with plan and then getting started. Now, I'm a little bit different in the way I approach that. I know a lot of people, especially if you talk to your parents and grandparents, are going to say, throw every penny you have at that debt, get rid of it as soon as possible. And if you watch the videos in sequence, when you watch the one about purchasing a home, my advice is a little bit different, where I say, don't throw every penny at it. Make sure you have backup money, because things will happen. And the last thing you want to do is throw every dollar at that debt. And especially with some debt, once it's paid, you can't have access to that again. Right? So when, not if, when something else comes up, if you have nothing in reserve, you could get yourself in worse trouble that you're in the first place. And you could lose some things that are classified as assets, vehicles, homes, and so forth, if you give yourself no cushion. So you need to build a little bit of a cushion while you're tackling that debt. And yes, if you do that, do you pay a little bit higher interest? You do. But as I've said before, if you throw everything at it, you have nothing, and then you need to go now when things are bad, try to access more money. If you can get a hold of it, if you can get a hold of more money, it's going to be at a higher rate anyway. And now you have another structured payment that you have to make. So you're not really doing yourself a favor, right? So still put something aside, which kind of leads into one of the other points, but while tackling that debt, just to give yourself some flexibility and breathing room.
Yes, yeah, that's really good, Glenn. And I like that idea of that vision board, that the vision board is becoming very common these days. So, and I know you mentioned about the short-term goal, and I'd like to add to that while we're doing short-term, it's also important to break down the goals to like intermediate financial goals, like what you're going to address in the next 3 to 10 years, and also the long-term financial goals from 10 years from now to retirement. What will you work on, right? And I don't want to overwhelm you too much. You're writing down a lot of things. We've covered a lot on mistake number 1. And I think it's just a good time for us to just move on to mistake number 2. All right. So I think we should just get right into that. So Glenn, I'd like you to take away and deal with our mistake number 2, which is living out.
I already jumped into it.
Pardon me?
I already jumped into it with the debt, right?
Oh,
But
yes, I know. So, but I know this, you touched on it, and that's why I really wanted to point it out to them. So like, if you're taking notes, or mistake number 2 is living outside your means. All
mhm.
right, so I'll let Glenn talk about that a little bit.
Well, thanks, Janice. The first thing I'm going to tell you guys is that with all these steps, these first two, I have been guilty of that. Believe me when I tell you, I know how it feels. It's not a great feeling, which is why I'm so passionate about helping people either minimize the time they spend doing that or avoiding it altogether. Because I know how it feels when you're trying to climb uphill. You know, for those of you who've ever, well, we can use even shoveling snow. You know, if you're shoveling and more is falling, like, how's this gonna end? Just stop, right? If you're shoveling and somebody else is shoveling and throwing it back at you, that's kind of how it feels sometimes, right? That
Yes.
you're like, I'm never gonna get out of this. But if I stop, they're just gonna bury me deeper. So the bottom line is you can't stop, right? You just can't stop. You really, really need to, again, I keep saying, formulate a plan of what you're going to do and stick with it. But
Yes.
you still need to be putting a little bit of cushion to give yourself flexibility, right? You cannot do without that. That is just vital because things do and will happen. If you've been alive long enough, you've experienced it probably multiple times, right? So you're either prepared somewhat fully or not at all. And that's just not a great feeling.
Exactly. And for me, I mean, I love to take notes, so I'm trying to make sure I am still encouraging persons to take notes, because I believe if it's not written, it's not done, right? So I'm going to encourage you just to write it down and remind yourself, what adjustments are you going to make in your living, so that you can begin now to cut costs, right? What can you do, right? So I also want you to ask yourself, what am I going to do beginning today? Beginning this week, begin this month, begin this year. And at first, this exercise might seem like a simple one, but I would like to hear some comments below. I mean, please just let this interactive. Just let me know how you feel about that exercise, and how will you be adding it to your calendar to make sure that it gets done. All right. So, I mean, that's all we'll talk about for mistake number 2. And Glenn touched a little bit on mistake number 3, which is not having an emergency fund. And I know Glenn is very passionate about this topic. So I'll just let you talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. Yeah, as I was saying, some people tell you it's counterintuitive that, basically, why are you trying to save up money when you have this debt? But stuff happens. It's called an emergency fund for a reason. Stuff is going to happen, and it's going to be stuff that you don't want to have happen, but you can't really stop it in a lot of cases. And the bottom line is, are you going to be prepared, somewhat prepared, or not at all? Ideally, they say having 6 months of expenses is a great emergency fund. And we know most people just don't have that. But if you're on the way, if you've got a month, couple of months, 2, 3 months, you can get that built up. And I hear a lot of times, you know what, Glenn, life keeps getting more and more expensive. Everything's more expensive, and I'm not getting paid any more money. So where am I supposed to get that from?
Mhm.
Well, unfortunately, we got to figure it out. So one suggestion I generally make is make it automatic. Whether you get paid weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, don't care. Get something filtered on payday and set it up to be automatic and move it out. Because here's the bottom line. Most of us are taught pay your expenses. You got your fixed expenses like rent, mortgage, insurances, and then you have the fluctuating ones like groceries and stuff like that. Pay your rent, take care of your stuff, or your mortgage, take care of your stuff, and then see what's left over. That formula doesn't generally leave much. So save right off the bat. And I'm not going to tell you 20%, 10%, 5%, but save something consistently and do it regularly. Make it automatic, right? And then make the adjustment in the rest. Yes, you can change your fixed costs like mortgage or rent, right? But maybe groceries, maybe coffee or dinner with a friend or whatever the case may be, those can be adjusted, right? So I'm not going to tell you exactly what to cut because I think or to minimize, that's really a personal thing. And you got to stick with the plan. So you got to make the choice on what to adjust. We'll use that word. But
Yes.
you need to adjust that and get started. And the easiest way is automatic right when you get paid, right? Because we all need it. Something will happen. The one place I'm going to tell you not to put it is in your RRSP. Why is that? Because when you withdraw money from your RSP, you're going to have a minimum of 10% withholding tax. Depending the amount, it could be up to 30%. So picture this. Something's gone wrong where I need money. I'm going to withdraw from my RSP. I'm going to lose anywhere from 10 to 30% of that right off the bat. And then when that whole withdrawal gets added to my account, to my income for the year, I may end up having to pay additional tax. So now you're not just losing on the emergency, you're losing on dollars in hand and you're losing on taxes. Not a good way to go. So your RSP cannot be your emergency fund. Savings account, tax-free savings, and depending on cash flow, having cash value insurance, right? Those are generally the ways to do that. But you want money that's liquid and accessible. So buying a hot stock tip might not be the way to go, because if that's not going in the direction you want and you need your funds, then you've got a problem, right? So make it automatic, get it started, do it regularly, and stick to it. And listen, at the end of the day, you know, I've had clients over the last 2 decades say, I'd like to put away $1,000 a month, but I can only do 100, so it doesn't make sense because that's too small. Well, get started. Here's the thing. If you start at 1,000 and you go 2-3 months and stop it, psychologically it does something to you, right? Because you feel like I'm failing at this. This is not working out the way I wanted it to. If you start at 100 and you go 2-3 months, this is easy. I can do 2 or 3 or 4. That does the opposite. It gives you more confidence. It builds you up more. You feel like I can do this and I will do this. And it does something different for you psychologically. So make sure it is a manageable, comfortable amount so you can stick with it. And then we can always change things and increase it. Okay, so those are a few tips on what I would do and what I would suggest that you do.
Yeah, those are great tips, Glenn. And I mean, I like the fact that you say just get started, right? And I'd also like to add to that, set a goal for the date you start saving for your emergency fund and put it there, right? And probably ask yourself, how much will you save and how often? I mean, as Glenn says, $100 not too small. I would even go lower because some persons say, guess what? I'm living from paycheck to paycheck. I don't have $50. Well, start with what you have. Do you have 20? Do you have 10? And you can bump it up because as it becomes consistent, then you can add as you go along. But just starting is something. And also list at least 3 ways you waste money during the week and how much, right? Just because that's money that you could use to put in your emergency fund. And, there are people say, well, I don't waste money. Well, list 3 ways that you're using money that you did not have to use it in that area, right?
Where we indulge more than we should. And even we don't want to use the word waste, right?
That's right. So,
yeah,
so let's take away the word waste.
Yeah, some people, it might be that 5 Starbucks a week, you might have to go to 3, right? I'm not saying don't go at all, because that probably going to make you more miserable than anything, right? But cut out 1 or 2 and make it every other day.
Yes.
And I tell you what, you'll enjoy it even more because it's not a daily thing. You're like, oh, this is great. All right, let me get ready for 2 days from now.
Exactly.
Right? So you kind of get to, you set the terms, you figure out what you need to adjust in order to get to that goal. I can sit until you cut this, and then you'd be like, I'm going to cut you out of my life because that's just too much.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, that's okay. But we're trying to get you on a program that's going to be sustainable and successful. So it has to be something you control as far as the adjustments you make, right? But accountability partners are huge too.
Yes, that's a good one, Glenn. Yes.
Say what I'm going to do, and then you checking at regular intervals to say I'm doing it or not. Why not? Accountability partners suck. I'll tell you why, because you have to keep doing it. It feels that way initially until you start doing it, that you don't even really need that, but it's just a good check-in. And you can look at each other and say, you know what, good job. you're on track. Things have improved from last time we checked in. Keep it going. Right. So all things to help you just get in a better position.
Great. Well, thanks, Glen. And I hope you all enjoy the working session with us today. And I mean, if you were pleased with what you hear, you were able to take notes, you got something, please feel free to give us a thumbs up. And for now, we'll say to be continued. Just join us again, right? For part 2. Part 2 is going to be fun again, and we're going to describe the last 2 mistakes, mistake number 4 and mistake number 5. And we're really looking forward to you joining us again. But remember, keep working on those implementations, all right? And we will see you again for part 2. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy, and we'll see you for the next part.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.